Careless desire! She had a third husband and one son who was the same age as me, and she had been giving me pleasure for over 20 years. Marie was 5 feet tall and weighed about 20, and a third of that weight was her breasts. Her bust size was 38, and she knew they attracted attention and displayed them accordingly. Low-cut blouses were an integral part of her closet, and when she was waiting for you at a table, she made sure you could see her cleavage. I'm sure she thought it helped her get a big tip. Marie worked as a waitress at the restaurant her parents owned. I ate breakfast and lunch there an average of 5 times a week. The food was good, the service and atmosphere was great, but the main reason I started going to the restaurant when I moved to the city was because I liked looking at her breasts and wanted to have sex with her. When I moved to the city, it was a sleepy little farm town, though it had quadrupled in size in the last 20 years, and at the time there were only 2 restaurants serving breakfast. Marie's opened at 6, and the other restaurant opened at 6:30. It was my first day in town, and the time was 6:15, so I went to Marie's restaurant that day. I felt an instant infatuation when Marie came to the booth where I was sitting, handed me a menu, and asked me what I would like to drink. Milk from these breasts is what I wanted to say, but coffee and cream is what came out of my mouth. Not only did Marie have gorgeous breasts, she had long black hair that hung down to the middle of her back, and her tight jeans showed off a commendable ass, but it was those breasts that drew attention. It was impossible to keep from looking at it on her 5-foot body and wondering why she didn't make it fall forward onto her face as she walked. When she returned to me with coffee, it was hard not to notice how her low-cut blouse showed off the creamy slope of her breasts and cleavage, eliciting a desire for rapture. She served me coffee, took my order, and I spent the next 40 minutes watching her as she served customers. It didn't escape me that the restaurant was full of men, and they all seemed to be as fascinated by Marie as I was. The next time I stopped for breakfast at another restaurant. The food was good, the service was good, but the waitresses all looked like my aunts and older sisters. Not one hard generator. I know breakfast was all I wanted, but if I had been faced with the choice of watching a couple of grandmothers fussing around me while I ate, or watching to see if Marie's breasts were popping out of her low-cut blouse, the choice would have been easy. Over the next few years, I became a regular at Marie's place, and it was inevitable that somewhere along the way I would start flirting with Marie. I saw the rings and knew she was married, but it made no difference to me. She wouldn't be the first married woman to have sex with me, but while Marie flirted back, she never made that final half step that might make me think I had a real chance with her. But a man can always hope. So I kept flirting with her. The restaurant was owned by Marie's parents, and Marie was the day shift manager. She would open the place at 6 in the morning, work until lunch, and then leave for the day. Since Saturday and Sunday were the busiest days at the restaurant, Marie had Tuesday and Wednesday off, so I only saw her on Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. One day, I playfully asked her when she was going to break down and give me a taste. She grinned slyly and said, "It would have been a long time ago if you were the right type." And what type is that? Married? Settled down? Someone who has a lot to lose? Why that type? In my experience, honey, men love to brag. And the last thing a married woman like me needs is for her husband to find out from rumors that his wife is available. So if I marry and play the role of a householder, I have a chance? The same chance as anyone else. Then I guess you and I will never be together. I like my life just the way it is. Your loss, honey, she said, and withdrew to take care of other clients. As she left, I thought about the way she put it. Married, settled, and remembered that it hadn't turned out so well. I remembered the day when, after coming home early, I caught my wife with another man in our house. I walked to the bedroom door just in time to hear her say, "Oh, God, I wish you could have sex with me forever." "No problem," I said. "He can have you, because I sure don't want you anymore." 3 years later, I tried again, and another 2 years after that, coming home from work, I found a note on the kitchen table. I took half of my savings and 2 certificates of deposit. Goodbye. A succession of wives followed, always strangers, and I swore I would never marry again. If I needed a wife to get to Marie, it was never going to happen. One day when I walked into the restaurant, Marie was no longer around. Her parents had died in a car accident, and now she had a restaurant to run. She was always in the office or in the back, and I hardly ever saw her, but when I did, I always let her know I still wanted to try it, and she always asked, "Are you married yet?" A few more years went by, and then Marie's husband was murdered. I didn't know the guy, so the only thing it meant to me was that Marie no longer had to worry about the rumors getting back to her husband. I would give her some time to mourn and then do my thing. 2 months after her husband died, I had to leave town for 6 months for work, and when I returned, it turned out that Marie was married and a month pregnant. I eventually resigned myself to the fact that the gods just didn't want me to have Marie and put her out of my mind. I still flirted with her every time I met her, but resigned myself to the fact that it was all I could do. A few more years went by, and one day I found out that the restaurant was closing. It turned out that Marie didn't own the building. Her parents were good friends of the owner, and he had given them a long-term lease. Shortly after Marie's parents died, he died of a heart attack, and the inheritance went to his son. The son told Marie that when it came time to renew the lease at the end of the year, he was not going to renew it. He said he had a better, more profitable use for the building. One morning, I was eating breakfast, and Marie was walking through the hall, stopping occasionally to talk to some of the regulars. When she stopped at my booth, I asked her if the rumors were true, and she said they were. I asked what she was going to do, and she just shrugged and said, "I'm going to close the doors and move on." "Why don't you just open another place?" "I don't have any money. I know now that Ralph gave Mom and Dad a good deal because they were good friends. I also know that the only way out is to own my own building, so I don't have to depend on a landlord. I just don't have the money to buy a building and open a restaurant in it." "Take out a loan from the bank." "I tried that. They said I didn't have enough business experience for them to take such a gamble. I told them they must be kidding, that the restaurant had been in business here for almost 40 years, and they said yes, but it was run by your parents. Seems like I should have a track record, and I don't. I told them it didn't matter, that if I didn't work out, they would have the building as collateral, and they laughed and said they were in the banking business, not real estate." As she was leaving, a thought occurred to me, and later that day I made some inquiries. It turned out that Lowell wanted to sell the building, and the realtors had convinced him that it would sell faster if it was vacant. I made a few phone calls to people I knew, then leaned back in my chair. It could work. It just might work. The next morning at breakfast, I asked Tiffany, the morning waitress, if Marie was there, and Tiff told me that Marie was in her office. I finished my pancakes and went back to the office. Marie looked up when I appeared in the doorway. I said, "Good morning," and then got right to the point. "Now, how badly do you want this restaurant to stay open?" "What are you asking?" "I'm asking what you're willing to do to keep the restaurant open." "I have no idea what you're getting at." "Come on, Marie, you're not stupid. Do you want to keep this place?" "Of course I do." "Then what are you willing to do to make it happen?" "How am I supposed to answer that? What are you trying to get me to say?" "I'd like to hear you say that you're willing to have sex with me if I can make it happen." Marie stared at me for a few seconds, then asked, "Are you serious?" "I've wanted it since the first day I walked in the front door. I have the opportunity to do what I want, so the question is, how badly do you want this place to stay open?" There were a few more seconds of silence, and then she said, "So much so that you're willing to have sex with me. What's this all about?" "I can buy the building and then give you a long-term lease on the same terms as in your current agreement. All you have to do is go to bed with me once a week for the duration of the lease. Or I'll give you a lease with the right to buy out for twice a week until you become the owner." "When you say, go to bed with you, what do you mean, all night or what?" "I'd like all night if you could arrange it with your husband, but realistically it could be 3 or 4 hours in the morning or afternoon." "Tell me more about the purchase option." I explained to her how it would work, and when I was done, she sat looking at me with a thoughtful expression on her face. There was silence for a few seconds, and then she said, "It won't happen until I have a signed lease in hand." "Which one?" "A purchase option." "Done," I said, extended my hand to her, and we shook it in agreement to the deal. It took 2 months to finalize the deal, and the day after I bought the building, I walked into Marie's office and handed her the lease. "All you have to do is read it and sign it. You may want to have a lawyer review it first." She set the contract aside, got up from the desk, and told me to sit in the chair. I did as she said, and she walked to the door, closed it, turned around, and walked back to where I was sitting. She looked up at me and smiled. "I'll poke your eyes out after my lawyer looks at the lease and says I have to sign it." 4 days later, as I was eating breakfast, Marie came to my stall, sat down across from me, and handed me a lease. When I took it, she said, "Signed, sealed, delivered, and the timing is perfect. The hubby is going fishing this weekend. You told me the first time we talked about it that you'd be happy to spend all night if you could get it. That doesn't happen very often, but you can get it tonight and tomorrow night if you want." I smiled my biggest and best smile at her and said, "I don't want it, honey. I'd love to have both." I looked at her lying on the bed, her hair fanning out, her magnificent breasts heaving upward like mountain peaks. It was the worst sex of my life. This gorgeous woman, a woman who went around all day looking like the personification of the goddess of sex, was the worst choice I'd ever had. No options. She just laid there, looking at me and smiling. Every now and then she would grunt when I had sex with her. I would have gotten more pleasure from a blow-up doll. It would take Marie 10 years to own the building, which means 10 years of sex with a blow-up doll twice a week. Marie thinks the sex is amazing and is trying to find a way for us to get together more often. I can't leave without hurting her feelings, and even if I could bring myself to do it, I'd have to go to another restaurant, and I don't want to do that because, frankly, Marie's place is the best in town. Every time I have sex with Marie, I'm reminded of the saying, "Be careful what you ask for, you might get it." The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.